Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. French President François Hollande and Greek officials have said the Egypt Air passenger jet that disappeared this morning en route from Paris to Cairo has crashed at sea. Egyptian and Greek authorities are searching for the jet, which had 66 people aboard. There's no information yet about what caused the crash. Last November, a Russian Airlines plane was brought down over Egypt, killing all 224 people on board. The self-proclaimed Islamic State claimed responsibility for taking down that plane. Meanwhile, an Azerbaijani plane has crashed in southern Afghanistan, killing 7 of the 9 people on board. The Pentagon says the plane crashed during takeoff when one of the plane wings clipped the runway. Ecuador, Venezuela, and El Salvador have announced they're recalling their ambassadors from Brazil over the suspension of democratically elected President Dilma Rousseff. She faces impeachment proceedings over accusations of tampering with government accounts to hide a budget deficit, but she's accused her right-wing opponents of fomenting a coup. The Salvadoran president, Sanchez Cerén, said he would not recognize the government of interim President Michel Temer, who himself faces corruption charges. The Salvadoran president said, quote, "We respect democracy and the people's will. In Brazil, an act was done that was once done through military coups," unquote. Meanwhile, President Dilma Rousseff has criticized Michel Temer's decision to install an all-white male cabinet during an interview with journalist Glenn Greenwald.
How did you react when you saw his team?
Look, I think that it seems to me that this interim and illegitimate government will be very conservative in every aspect, one of which is the fact that it is a government of white men without blacks in a country that in the last census in 2010, and I think this is very important, more than 50% of the population self-identified as being of African origin. So I think that not having any women or black people in the government shows a certain lack of care for the country you are governing.
In Washington, D.C., Senate Democrats held a mock confirmation hearing Wednesday for Judge Merrick Garland, President Obama's nominee, to replace Justice Antonin Scalia on the Supreme Court. No Republican senators showed up to the mock hearing. Meanwhile, presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has unveiled a list of 11 candidates he would consider to fill Scalia's seat on the Supreme Court if he's elected president. The 11 judges are overwhelmingly conservative, and the majority are white men. The list includes Judge William Pryor, who's argued for the criminalization of consensual sex between gay and lesbian partners, and who opposes abortions, including in cases of rape and incest. During law school, Pryor said his inspiration for becoming a lawyer was, quote, "because I wanted to fight the ACLU," unquote. The list also includes Judge Thomas Hardiman, who supported strengthening mandatory minimum sentences, and Judge Raymond Gruender, who ruled a 1978 pregnancy law does not give female employees the right to contraceptive coverage. Curiously, the list also includes Judge Don Willett, who is known for his extensive commentary on Twitter, where he's mocked Donald Trump multiple times, including in a Donald Trump haiku that read, quote, "Who would the Donald name to SCOTUS? The mind reels, weeps, can't finish tweet." Meanwhile, Donald Trump met with former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger in New York to discuss foreign policy Wednesday. During his time in office, Henry Kissinger oversaw a massive expansion of the war in Vietnam and the secret bombings of Laos and Cambodia. He also orchestrated secret U.S. military interventions across Latin America, from Bolivia to Uruguay to Chile to Argentina. In Nigeria, family members say one of 219 schoolgirls abducted by Boko Haram from their dormitory in Chibok 2 years ago has returned home. 19-year-old Amina Ali Darsha Nkeki is the first of the group to be rescued. 57 other girls managed to escape soon after the 2014 attack. Her return sparked renewed hope for the family members of other girls who are still missing. This is Nkeki Muta.
You can imagine, since this adoption, we have been here every day, unless if I'm not in Abuja. Every day I've been here because of the hope. And our hope now has been rekindled because of the rescue of this very one that I got the news today.
Afghan officials say 5 people were killed in a U.S. drone strike in Zabul province Tuesday. The officials say the victims were al-Qaeda militants, including one commander. The Pentagon confirmed the strike, but refused to say whether anyone was killed. The Parliament of the Seychelles has voted to decriminalize sex between consensual gay and lesbian partners. Before Wednesday's vote, homosexuality was a crime punishable by up to 14 years in prison in the Seychelles. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has formally apologized for the 1914 Komagatumaru incident in which Canada turned away a Japanese steamship in order to prevent more than 300 Sikhs from immigrating to Canada. The move was widely acknowledged to be aimed at keeping Sikhs out of Canada. Then Premier of British Columbia, Sir Richard McBride, said at the time, quote, "We always have in mind the necessity of keeping this a white man's country," unquote. On Wednesday, more than 100 years after the boat was turned away, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apologized.
No words can erase the pain and suffering they experienced. Regrettably, the passage of time means that none are alive to hear our apology today. Still, we offer it fully and sincerely for our indifference to your plight, for our failure to recognize all that you had to offer, for the laws that discriminated against you so senselessly, and for not apologizing sooner. For all these things, we are truly sorry.
Tomorrow, Friday, we'll be broadcasting from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation studios in Toronto, Canada. Kentucky has elected the first African-American to the state legislature in 20 years. On Tuesday, Attica Scott won the Democratic primary for state representative of the 41st District. She has no Republican challenger for the fall's general election. During the primary, Scott overwhelmingly defeated longtime incumbent Tom Reiner, best known for his support of Kentucky County Clerk Kim Davis, who was briefly jailed for refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples following the Supreme Court decision legalizing marriage equality nationwide. Attica Scott, in contrast, has been a longtime social justice activist and a vocal supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement. In South Carolina, the legislature has passed a bill banning abortion past 20 weeks, even in the case of rape and incest. Governor Nikki Haley has said she will sign the bill. The highest court in Massachusetts has dealt a victory to 4 teenage plaintiffs in a lawsuit over climate change. In a case brought by the teenagers and environmental groups, the Massachusetts Supreme Court found Massachusetts failed to fulfill its legal obligations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that are warming the planet. In a statement, 17-year-old plaintiff Seamus Miller called the ruling a, quote, historic victory for young generations advocating for changes to be made by the government. The global climate change crisis is a threat to the well-being of humanity and to my generation that has been ignored for too long, Miller said. And here in Madison, Wisconsin, the Graduate Student Union at the University of Wisconsin-Madison has voted to join the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. The 9,000-member union is the oldest graduate student union in the U.S. It becomes the 3rd student union in about a month to vote to divest from Israeli state institutions and corporations that do business in the Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories. And today would have been the 95th birthday of civil rights activist Yuri Kochiyama. Until her death in 2014, Kochiyama championed civil rights, protested racial inequality, and fought for causes of social justice. Her activism began after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, when she and her family were held in a Japanese-American internment camp. She was with Malcolm X the day he was gunned down in Harlem's Audubon Ballroom, cradling his head as he lay dying on the stage. Today, Google marked her birthday with an illustration of the civil rights activist on its homepage. To see our interview with Yuri Kochiyama, go to democracynow.org. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.